Vishwa Nruthya Bhushana.
Very warm good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Badari Divya Bhushan inviting you all for today's Vishwa Nruthya Bhushana festival series happening on our Facebook page, Vishwa Nruthya Bhushana. As you're all aware, this is an interactive session series involving several celebrities and dancers across the world. Today we have acclaimed choreographer, social activist, dancer, Sri Jonathan Hollander. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ ಭೂಷನ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರದರ್ಶಕಗಳು ಮತ್ತು ದೃಶ್ಯ ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತಿ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಈ ಸುಂದರ ದಿನದ ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗಾನಭೂಷಣಕ್ಕೆ ಕರೆದೊಯ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಎಂದಿನಂತೆ ಈ ದಿನವೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಹಲವಾರು ದಿಗ್ಗಜರು ಪ್ರತಿದಿನ ಇದುವರೆಗೂ ಬರ್ತಾನೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ದಿನ ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಶ್ರೀಯುತ ಜಾನಥನ್ ಹಾಲೆಂಡರ್ ಅವರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಪ್ರಖ್ಯಾತ ಅದ್ಭುತ ನರ್ತಕರು, ಹಾಗೆಯೇ ಕೊರಿಯೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ ಕೂಡ. ಹಲವಾರು ಕೊಲಾಬರೇಟಿವ್ ವರ್ಕ್ ಅನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಈ ದಿನ ಅವರನ್ನ ಸ್ವಾಗತಿಸುವ ಮುಂಚೆ ಅವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೆಲವು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನ ತಿಳಿದುಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. Jonathan Hollander is an American dancer, choreographer, educator, and artistic director. He founded the Battery Dance Company in New York City in 1976, opening the Battery Dance Studio that same year. He also founded the Downtown Dance Festival held annually in New York City since 1982. Since 2008, Downtown Dance Festival has included the Erasing Borders Festival of Indian Dance. As a dance educator, Hollander has been active in bringing dance into public schools and is known for award-winning Dancing to Connect program. He is also known for his ties to India and for presenting and promoting Indian dances in New York. He is a co-founder of the Indo-American Arts Council. Hollander left college to pursue dance career in New York City, where his teachers included several dignitaries, and in addition to offering dance classes, the Battery Dance Studio has been the site of salon events featuring such notable Indian artists like Mallika Sarabhai, Jhaveri Sisters, Sandeep Malik, Nirupama Rajendra, several more. Hollander spent 3 months in India as a Fulbright lecturer in dance in 1992, during which time he deepened his connections to the Indian dance community. He taught workshops at the Darpana and Kadam institutions in Ahmedabad, MS University in Baroda, Nalanda Dance Institute, and NCPA in Mumbai. And his company undertook a 6-city tour of India. The following year, he organized the American debut and tour of the Jhaveri Sisters, renowned exponents of Manipuri dance. This program made its debut at the Music Center in Chennai, appeared at the Lincoln Center for Outdoors Festival, and undertook an 18-city tour of the United States. He has organized various conferences, seminars, and town hall meetings related to Indian dance. The Battery Dance Company tours nationally and internationally, sometimes as a cultural ambassador under the auspices of the US State Department. It has appeared at such notable venues as Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts in New York City, the Beijing International Modern Dance Festival, Taipei Arts Festival, Open Look Festival in St. Petersburg, Stockholm's Modern Institute, Hugo Performing Arts Center in Japan, Cultural Center of the Philippines, National Center for the Performing Arts in Mumbai, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome this multifaceted, amazing, wonderful artist, choreographer, and social activist, Sri Jonathan Hollander. Hello, Jonathan.
Thank you, Bhushan. That's quite an introduction. I don't know if I can live up to it.
Oh my God, your kaleidoscope of colors or work is huge and vast. Though you would have said, yeah, please. Though you would have said this many times, my first question is an obvious question. In your umpteen thousand interviews, you would have mentioned how you started, what you started, how you were fascinated. But still, for the new audience, I would just want you to have a quick peekaboo into how you were fascinated into dance and how you thought of becoming a dancer later.
Well, I guess the story begins with my mother, who was an artist, a multidisciplinary artist. She was primarily a pianist, and we had two Steinway grand pianos in our living room. When she would play, I would dance up and down the stairs, across the furniture, and up and down the tables and under, along with my three siblings. So music was infused in our household. And she was also a dancer, and she and my sister took dance classes in the Washington, D.C. area. This was Western modern dance, really with a teacher who came from Germany originally. Before the war, she had come over to the United States. And you may know that Western modern dance had a lot of its roots in Germany and Austria before the war. But during the Nazi period, many of these artists fled to safe havens in Israel or Switzerland or the United States, and then kind of fused with people like Isadora Duncan, some of the sort of prime genitors of Western American contemporary dance. So I was exposed to Western dance, but I was not doing it other than folk dancing. I think many of us as children enjoy doing folk dancing and dancing on stage in contemporary musical theater and so forth. But none of that was with training. The rigor of dance training was not something I experienced until I was 18 years old and went to the University of California at Irvine, where there was a conservatory style program. And that's where I began to really try to get my body into shape as a dancer. However, backtracking 2 years, when I was 16 years old, I was in India. People know this story, that I was in Mumbai living with an Indian family. Nirupama Mehta, one of the founders of the Indian National Theatre, and Siddharth Mehta, the managing director of ICICI. So we had a banker and an artist in the same household, exactly like my American family, with my father as an antitrust attorney with the US Department of Justice and my mother as a pianist and so forth. So I found myself in a very comfortable setting in Mumbai. It's, going from the suburbs of Washington, D.C. to downtown Mumbai could be a radical change. But when the family is there to make you feel comfortable and to bring you into the fold, so to speak, then it's a whole different thing. And that's when I met the Javeri sisters and Parvati Kumar, Sucheta Chapikar, and really became exposed to Indian dance much more deeply than I had been exposed to Western dance at that time.
Now that is quite a journey. Like you have been seeing Indian dance, you have practiced or probably seen a lot of things. Was there any kind of confusion? Did you wanted to do? When was the first thing that you thought? First time you thought that there should be some collaboration with the work, some collaborative arts? Now you were fascinated with the Javeri sisters. You took them back. That was there. But were you ever wanting to? When was the first thought of collaboration of two art forms happen? You thought of
that was much later. I mean, I would say that the fusion of music was before dance, in the sense that Indian music is so complex, and it's its own language, its own vocabulary, and it takes a very long time for a Western ear to become accommodated to Indian music. And that's something that I really wanted, and I craved to understand Indian music, having been brought up with A, B, C, D, E of Western music on the piano. I studied classical Western piano for 13 years. So my ear was attuned to Western music, but then at age 16, 17, 18, I began to listen to Indian music and the microtones and the way that the sitar can bend a note. These things, it just took a while for me to really make that understood to my ear. And it wasn't until I began working with Badal Roy, a tabla player based in the United States, who was actually the first Indian musician to be embraced by the top jazz musicians of the United States, Miles Davis, people like that, Ornette Coleman. I met Badal through Gene Erdman and Joseph Campbell. People may be familiar with the name of Joseph Campbell because as an American scholar, he was the utmost in studying Indian mythology and Indian art. And his wife, Jean Erdman, was a dancer with the pioneer of American modern dance, Martha Graham. And she set off on her own, and together they created a theater of the open eye. So they brought together musicians from all over the place. And that's when I met Badal. And eventually I asked him to create a score just with the bowls and the tabla for my dance creation called Seen by a River. Seen by a River was basically the image that I had was being at Darpana and looking at the Sabarmati River, which had no water in it. The people, just a little bit of water. It was the dry season. And the donkeys walking across that riverbed, the people washing clothes, the Dobiwala washing the clothes in what little water there was. And just these various scenes that took place on that riverbed. And so Badal created a score and I choreographed it. So that was my first entry, and it was easier with rhythm than it was with the microtones of the melodies of Indian music. That came later. And actually an experiment that I did with the Finnish composer, Eero Hämeniemi, I found Eero as a Western-trained classical musician who was coming to Chennai every year and studying Carnatic music. So we're the same age, and we were Western-trained people who were digging deeply in Indian culture. And so he gave me the recording of a piece called Laya Priya that he had created on commission of the Helsinki Philharmonic. And it involved Kari Kudimani and his musicians as soloists with a full symphony orchestra, Western symphony orchestra. I really think that Eero was probably the only person who could do something like that because of his training in Western. He was a fully fledged Western composer, but then sitting down with musicians in Chennai year after year after year to study Carnatic music. So this piece performed only once because bringing Kari Kudimani and his musicians all the way to Helsinki, Finland, and working with the Helsinki Philharmonic, that was a massive undertaking. And fortunately, Finland takes its music very seriously, and they had done a beautiful recording. So Eero allowed me to choreograph his Laya Priya, and that piece went all over India. It was actually performed in a very memorable opportunity on Salt Lake, on a stage out over the water. That's something we'll never forget. And that piece traveled around the world and essentially gave me the opportunity to bring Western music and Indian music into one because of Eero's achievement in that regard.
My questions keep going up and down. So the curiosity always is generated. How did your brain change? The battery dance come into significance? Why the name battery?
Well, that's a very simple answer, unlike my 20-minute answer to your last question. Battery dance was, our first location was at the southern tip of Manhattan, which is called the Battery. And so battery has many meanings in our vocabulary. Battery is the percussion section of an orchestra. Battery is, of course, an energy source. And battery is the Battery, the lower Manhattan part of Manhattan. So we were very specifically located in this place where there was no art, there were no theaters, there was no place to perform. And that inspired the creation of Battery Dance Company as an organization that aimed to bring art to everyone, not just the few aficionados who really understood everything, but to try to expand the audience for dance, expand the audience for music.
Does contemporary dance follow grammar, or is it racy or difficult to comprehend contemporary dance in comparison to the traditional dance forms, the way you have perceived it?
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up because Sudarshan Chakravorty told me that he would try to tune in to this show today, but at the same time, Atta Kalari it's having its graduation. And Attakalari, right in Bangalore, is obviously a place where contemporary dance is practiced and where, in fact, my dancers have done workshops there in January 2018. So contemporary dance is not so unknown in India, although I think that many audiences probably stay away from it because they feel like they can't understand the language. One thing I would say about Western contemporary dance is it gives the opportunity to the individual voice. Each choreographer, each dance company has its own approach, and you can't look at contemporary dance as one thing. It's a multiplicity of different ideas and styles and genres, and the individual voice is always there, bringing it through. So Jonathan Hollander's choreography is not the same as the hundreds of other choreographers. We all approach it. We bring everything we have as individuals, as human beings, as life experience into our work. And so, of course, it's made up of different components. I'm actually not hearing you. Are you hearing me?
Yes, 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 yes. I can hear you.
No,
Now,
I hear you.
yeah. The point now was like you worked in India, you traveled the globe, and I want to float back to a couple of years before when you decided that you would want to take this up as a profession and you would want to stream down more into dancing. Was there any kind of pressure from your parents or your family saying that you would, of course it's a different culture and different country there, but then several people have come to India and experienced art and probably taken art to a further level. Was there any kind of compulsion or binding from them saying that no, you can't do it? They probably become a musician over here. Was there any kind of an argument or any kind of thought there?
I would say that my parents were incredibly tolerant and patient because they could have thought I was jumping off a cliff. I dropped out of college during my second year because I was invited to come to New York by Merce Cunningham. And I realized, there I was in Southern California in this conservatory setting, but I really didn't feel that the dance trajectory, dance pathway of going into Hollywood and TV and film, I didn't feel that that was my direction. And that's really where my colleagues, my fellow dancers at University of California at Irvine, they were headed in that direction. Whereas I wanted to be involved in New York City, in the art culture of New York City. So really, it was not much of a choice. But of course, my parents were very worried about me. I don't think it was a question of pushing me into a career or trying to mold me. I think that whatever would have motivated them at that time was fear, the fear that I could be on a path of destruction. A lot of young people, passion can be a good thing or it can be something that can be destructive if you don't have the architecture, the structure around you to support you in a choice as unstable as dance. Dance is an extremely unstable career in the United States, and I guess in India as well, unless you come from a family that is, has the means to support you for life. How are you going to support yourself, much less a family with a career that is so changes every day? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The arts are in tremendous stress right now. I know that's true in India. It's definitely true here in the United States.
Very much, very much. Yeah.
So going back to my parents' decision, I mean, in America, the parents do not decide generally what their children should do. I mean, if they try to, maybe they have a child who's compliant and who, is happy to have the direction of their parents. I'm happy to have the direction of my parents in terms of the ethics and culture and way of life that they espoused. They were mentors for me in terms of their honesty and their care for the fellow man and mankind. They were very, very charitable people and people who were not completely self-centered in their life. They gave their lives to their family as well as to their community. And what's happening in the United States right now is a rupture. We're experiencing a terrible rupture where the society itself is polarized, and it's a very frightening time. And I think the same thing is true of you all in India, that which way are you going to go? I mean, I hope that India sort of remembers its heritage and its legacy going back thousands of years. I mean, there is not a culture that was more inclusive than Indian culture. And yet right now, this sides are being taken and people are being sort of forced against each other. And I just hope that the arts community can be the one to show the way towards inclusivity, tolerance, and support among different communities. I mean, this communalization has been happening for a long time in India. And in the United States, I hardly even recognize my country right now in terms of what we're going through. So, you know, I just reach out to dancers because dance is an art form that brings people together. It's about communication. It's about a giving. The artist gives. The best artists are givers, not takers. We learn, we open ourselves, we're permeable to ideas and to cultures, and then it's our job to give to the audience and our students and our, you know, to give inspiration. And I think we all have to really think very, very hard right now about what we support and what we're about as artists. And I know this is extremely challenging. It's not something that I think is easy, but I just wanted to put that out there because we can't ignore the fact that this is a time of change. And which way is the change going to go? Are we going to become more inclusive? Are we going to become more tolerant and more understanding of each other in this globalized world? Or are we going to fracture and rupture and take sides and go against each other?
When initially you started the company and you floated the dance festival, how did you fund and what are the pros and cons of organizing a festival abroad? I'm sure by now you know the process of a festival, organizing a festival in India. So what were the difficulties that you found when you started organizing regarding the funding, the sponsor, the patronage? How did you go about it?
Well, that's a huge question. I think the issue is people are probably wondering, how do the arts support themselves in a place like the United States? And essentially, I was not a business person. I did not have a business background. And I had to learn the skills of marketing, PR, accounting, bookkeeping. I mean, you name it, everything goes into it. Fortunately, over time, Battery Dance is in its 45th year. And over time, I have, you know, basically schooled myself and been schooled by people like our board members who are professionals in these various fields, who've made me sit down at a table and have a conversation and learn new skills that I didn't have myself. So I think the issue, it goes back to what I was saying about the politics and of society. Do we listen to each other? Do we learn from each other? Do we know how to collaborate? So for example, the corporations, the foundations, the government agencies, the patrons, are they your friends? Do you listen to them? You know, or are they some kind of alien beings that you try to take from? So I think that this is the key to everything. Can you collaborate? Can you respect? Who are you and who are your friends and who are the people that you rely on and who rely on you? It's a give and take situation. So a festival is about the give and take between the community that you're serving. And for us, that's Lower Manhattan. It's all of New York City. It's now the world through our festival that went online this year. It was the 39th festival. The pandemic hit. We had all kinds of opportunities and thoughts about what we were going to do. And then all of a sudden, everything was upended. So we went online, and it turned out that we had almost 30,000 viewers for a festival that normally maybe might have had 10,000 or 12,000. So there are aspects, there are silver linings in this situation, and we just have to embrace it. We have no choice. Our president and his first lady were just diagnosed with COVID. Many of the people in the administration are sick with COVID right now. This has just happened. This is the news. What's going to happen? We have an election coming up. We lost one of the most brilliant and inspiring women of the history of the United States, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She died leaving a spot open on our Supreme Court. I bring this up because we as dancers are affected by all of these things. We don't live in a hothouse or a bubble. We're part of our own society, and we need to embrace that responsibility.
As you have been training several enthusiasts, what is the fate of those solo artists who get trained? Unlike in India, you can branch out to become soloists, or you can join a company and become a performer in the company, or probably you can become a guru and just teach. What are the chances of growth with respect to a dancer who is getting trained abroad, probably in a contemporary genre, or the chances that you expose them in battery dance academy?
Well, we're not an academy. Let me make that clear. We're a professional performing arts institution, and we do work in New York City public schools. We do run programs overseas. When we went to India, for example, most recently, we not only performed in theaters and venues, but we also did workshops. For example, we were in the smaller city of Hassan. You're familiar with it. It's very close to you in Mysore. And no one had ever seen a Western contemporary dance company before, but Unath Hassan Ratnaraju organized the municipal theater. It was overflowing with over 1,200 people on a Sunday night. And not only that, the next day we were in a school for children with disabilities. We were doing a workshop for people like Mithun Sham, who came all the way from Bangalore to take part in choreographic workshops, as well as Sean Scantlebury's fitness workshop. How does fitness fit into the dance regime? You know, we try to give everything. It's our goal to give everything that we can when we go abroad. It's not just about sort of this helicopter in, do a performance, and helicopter out. We try to immerse ourselves in whatever the community needs and is. In 2014, 2 of our dancers worked with survivors of human trafficking in Delhi and in Badlapur. And this became part of a film called Moving Stories, which we hope will be available in India very soon. It talks about our work with young people in situations where they wouldn't ordinarily have access to the arts. They need an opportunity to sort of reclaim their own bodies in terms of the human trafficking victims. And to see the smiles and to see the outpouring of love in a workshop like that, I mean, this is what makes it all worthwhile for me, frankly. This combination of performing, creating, and outreach, engagement with communities. Hyderabad, we had a remarkable program that Srinath Mutyala had put together for us, where we touched on so many different parts of the community. You know, people who didn't have access ordinarily, as well as the big performance at the Shilpakala Vedika.
That's commendable. And that brings me to another question. Like, you've been working with several refugees and several distraught or probably underprivileged children and all. Yes, one practical issue of all these things, reaching out to all the sources of underprivileged thing is a lot of social work by itself. But at the same time, as sustain art, see, even Spikmak in India is doing, where the art is being reached to school levels, grassroots levels. But then how does an individual dancer who is not a part of a big stream like Spikmak reach out, though you would want to do it? Let us say a dancer who is thoughtful enough and who wants to start something like this to his goals, how does he do it? Because he needs to sustain, he needs to support his family, he needs to support his immediate colleagues who are also dependent on him on a smaller scale, like a company or something. How do you think? What are your tips to do that?
I think every individual, everyone, not just dancers, but everyone has some kind of option to support their community. I don't think, you know, that I can give the equation for somebody sitting in Mysore or Bangalore or Hyderabad right now. I think that everyone has to look around them and see what is their capability, what can they do. I'm so impressed and moved by the various people around India who have a little bit more. And what they're doing with that little bit more is making food packets for the people who have less. I mean, it's remarkable the activities that people have found to do during this time of the pandemic. Um, it's very inspiring, and I think that each person has to reach into their hearts and look around them. Who is needy? What can I do? Sometimes I have to admit, it's overwhelming. You can become very depressed by the situation, but I can't come up with a recipe for each and every person. I think it's something that we have to dig into ourselves and find out. I looked around in my own community and I saw that within the 1.3 million students in the New York City public school system, that many, many children go to school and don't have access to dance. And dance is such an incredibly enriching experience, as many of our audience knows. It's like dance just keeps giving. You dance, you're healthier, your mind has a way of sort of turning off some of the intellect and getting into a deeper place, and then bringing that out into your dance. So we've been working in the New York City public schools for decades and decades. I mean, we're 45 years old as a dance company. I think almost all of those 40 years we've been working in the public schools. So I do have a plan to come back to India and to share our methodology called Dancing to Connect with dancers in India who would like to be trained and would like to know what our methodology is, and to then spread it into government schools in India. This has been a plan of mine for a long time, but unfortunately everything like this, as you said, takes money, takes resources. And so I'm waiting for the time that I can do that. That is a big goal of mine.
Any memorable events any memorable memory as a Fulbright scholar?
So many, so many. I wanted to.
Can you share some?
Well, I'm always, when the child who takes too much on his plate and can't eat it all, that's me. I always put too much on the plate. So for example, when I had the opportunity for a 3-month Fulbright in India, normally it's a grant for one person. So for me, I not only brought my wife and my 18-month-old child, because the idea of being separated at that point from an 18-month-old for 3 months was not something that we could really embrace. So I brought them, but then I also brought my entire dance company, because I saw that the opportunity of working with C.V. Chandrasekhar at MS University, and with Malika and Mrinalini Sarabhai at Darpana, and with Kumudini Lakya, at Kadam, and then also working with the Javeri sisters, who helped me organize a tour of Andhra Pradesh. And in those times, I had one grant. It was supposed to support me. I stretched it to support all of that. So we were traveling on second-class non-AC trains through Andhra Pradesh. And that was a hair-raising experience. We actually, the thing is, I remember the panic of trying to get bottled water in 1992, enough to sustain us through a 10-hour train ride, things like that. And dacoits were spotted in the area that were attacking trains. So we had to keep the shutters down, no AC, and then arriving at a place like Tirupati or Vijayawada, Vizag at those times, it wasn't a normal thing for an American dance company to arrive in those places. And we did. And you can imagine the challenges that we faced. I mean, even today, if you were trying to do a tour of Andhra Pradesh by train, you would have quite a challenge. Day by day, getting on that train, traveling for 10 hours, getting out, being met by a marching band, being celebrated, taken to the theater. The theater had 3 lights instead of 30 or 60 that you need for your production, figuring out how to get a ladder high enough to actually reach the lights that had never been touched in 10 years since they were first installed there, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, one thing memorable about that is that I learned not to scream. I was screaming at people because they didn't do what I asked them to do. And I completely got laryngitis. A word would not come out. So I went to the doctor in Vizag, and, I pointed to my throat. He examined my throat and he said, you have to stop screaming. And I was like, how did you know that I was screaming? He said, well, your throat is completely lacerated. So I realized, it was not productive to yell. I wasn't getting anything more out of the workers by yelling at them. No. Fortunately, through many of my tours of India, I've had the help of Barry Steele, who is our lighting designer and production designer. And Barry somehow had the skill of getting any technical crew to do whatever he wanted. I don't know how he did it. It's a magical sauce he has, but these are the skills that you learn over time. Don't scream, don't push, don't have a conniption fit because you're only hurting yourself. How to get people to work their best, do their best, what's capable, only with what's capable. If you go into a theater and they only have 3 lights, you have to make a show somehow. I mean, it's up to you. You got there, you took 7 people there. There's the stage. The audience is coming in fully dressed in their, glittering, best gear, and you're looking like a wreck screaming in the background. It doesn't work.
That's what you learn when you are pitted against challenges and you into full AC, technically tech-savvy auditoriums to no lights or probably no flooring or no wooden flooring to no curtains.
Right. What are you going to say? Are you going to say, no, I'm not doing this? No, of course not. You're going to do it.
You go on, but then you
best.
learn. Yes, this is what teaches you. Time teaches you how to cope up with such disastrous moments, I think. Now, when you came to India, you toured and then you go back and you wanted to collaborate and things like this. Somewhere across the line, you were more and more fascinated towards India, I believe, because many collaborations have happened with using Indian dancers or Indian music. What is the special connection with India that you find or probably you're attracted to?
I've said so many times to audiences around the world that they need to look to India when they're thinking about dance. There's no other country that comes close to India in terms of its dance culture. And I mean, Indians know that because there are eight distinct classical dance forms that have been recognized and many more that will be recognized in the next 10 years, I believe. Mayurbhanj Chow, for example. These are forms that are so exquisite. And recently at our festival, we introduced our audience for the first time to Kudiyatam with Kapila Vinu and to Teyam with Pradesh Tirupatiya, both from Kerala. I mean, Kerala alone, if you were just to take the state of Kerala and forget about the rest of India and look at the dance culture in that one state, it's mind-boggling. And that's true for Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Bengal, of course. People are going to be angry if I don't mention Gujarat and every other state. So I better. Each state in India has its own dance culture. Maharashtra is where I first was introduced to so much in Indian dance. So, yeah, if you really love dance and you're open-minded to dance of the world, you have to spend time with India, and it'll keep inspiring you because there's always more to learn. That's how I feel. Manipur.
Is dance gender biased unlike in India? Like, do you feel over there dance is like gender biased or exploited? The dancers are exploited the other way around, unlike in India?
What kind of exploitation?
Exploitation probably for performances, exploitation probably by the teacher and the student, exploitation by the organizer and the performer, exploitation by the you go for one and you get 3 instead of 1.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that Indian dancers, I'm sort of an advocate for the Indian dance community to come together. I think the Indian dance community is cutthroat competition, and people suffer because of that. Because if there were a combined, unified voice saying no to corporate banners in the background, no to stages that have gutted holes in them and people dancing barefoot and hurting themselves, no to green rooms that are filthy, no to these kinds of conditions, no to paying for performances. I mean, 3 dancers, 5 dancers, 100 dancers cannot accomplish this because they'll just hire somebody else. They'll say, okay, you don't want this, we'll find someone else. The supply overwhelms the demand, by some incredible proportion. And so only if dancers come together and work together will this be rectified. And I think people have to say, I will not perform in front of a corporate logo. I just won't. It's not art. The art is diminished when there's some kind of branding or logo behind it. To me, of a literary festival or a performance festival that has the signage on the background, I don't accept that. I wouldn't perform in front of that. And I don't think Indian dancers should either. Why? Because when they create a production, the lighting, the ambiance, the feeling, the choreography itself is meant to be seen in a certain way. And it's broken by language and verbiage that does not relate directly to the production. So, that's one of my bandwagons for Indian dance. But exploitation, yes. We hear this thing, oh, will you perform? It's great publicity for you. It's great exposure for you. Well, no, not for a professional dancer, not for a professional dance company, not even for somebody on the way up. Exposure is not enough. There needs to be some kind of financial remuneration. And I've said this before, if you have a leak in your plumbing, you get the plumber and you don't tell him that you're going to give him a very good review online and therefore you don't need to pay him. The same thing should be true of dancers. We need to be supported financially. And I think, in this country, we do have the National Endowment for the Arts, which is in Washington, D.C., and is charged with supporting all of the arts across the country. We also have each state. New York State is where I am. We have the New York State Council on the Arts with a multi-$100 million budget to support the arts across New York State. The museums, the symphony orchestras, the opera, the dance, the visual arts, design. And India does not have this kind of very, very well-structured support from the state of Karnataka, the city of Mysore, the federal government. Money should be in a locked box for the arts from the government, because look at the dividends that the arts are paying for India as a whole in terms of tourism. You can match the beauty of Indian art and the attraction of the Indian arts to the tourism industry. And the tourism budget is huge, but the arts budget in terms of the government is not huge. And also, I don't even know what the mechanism is for the decision-making about support for the arts. Like, for example, you and your dance company or someone else nearby, I don't know who decides how much you should get per year to support your activity. Now, in our case, we are supported for a particular thing. For example, if we put in a proposal to do X number of programs in New York City public schools, that becomes a compelling argument for the government to support. They may not support my next creative production. It may be that I need to go to individuals who appreciate my aesthetic and my art, who would then give contributions that would support that. But the government should make some policies, some national policies, some regional policies about support for the arts. You need it. And right now, in this time of the pandemic, it's going to be sort of giving a haircut to the whole arts field, the performing arts field in particular, because when will you be able to have in-theater performances again? It could be another 12 months. When are people going to feel safe with the vaccine, with, bringing the numbers way down, that they're going to actually go into an enclosed space where somebody next to them could be contagious? So this is a long-term situation that has to be grappled with.
How are artists in US combating this pandemic? Because supporting themselves during the time of this distress. In India, at least, there are no performances, but the artists are probably teaching online or doing something. But how are artists there coping up with distress and earning?
It's the same. It's the same here. That people are going. They're letting go of their rented apartments and going home to their families. They're doing things they would never do at age 30, 35, because it's a time of desperation. One of my dancers just left her apartment in New York and moved back to California, at least temporarily, maybe permanently, because she can't afford the New York rent. And also because there are no actions happening here, she can be doing our programs from her parents' home in California. When we're doing online programs in other countries, which on Monday, we start teaching our first Dancing to Connect program virtually in Germany. So in a German city, there will be 15 or 20 young people in a large space. The numbers are very, very low in that particular city in terms of infection. So they can be in a dance studio, okay? There's a camera, there's a beamer, there's a screen, and our teacher from California will be teaching them on Zoom and setting them in motion in terms of the methodology of Dancing to Connect. We will be doing this for the next, how long? I don't know. This is our pilot program, but we also got a grant to work in South America to do Spanish language dance classes for satellite television. So this wouldn't have happened if not for the pandemic. We wouldn't have come up with that idea. That idea is a result of the circumstances and the fact that communication and collaboration and cross-cultural work needs to carry on in some way, even if airplanes are not flying full. And, I just heard that a friend of mine in Bhubaneswar, who had gotten admitted for a PhD program in Germany, the day before he was supposed to leave, all flights were canceled from India to Germany. So, we're dealing with terrible, terrible trauma right now across the field. And I think we have to face it and we have to learn from each other. So maybe hearing this, what I'm talking about now, maybe some of the people who are listening in might be inspired to think of some kinds of solutions that will work for them and their circumstances. I hope so.
That's the whole idea that I floated the show, so that many dignitaries like you come over here and share your experiences and say, hey, you're not the only one, everyone is affected. Let's team up together to stand united and show up a brave front against this pandemic. Of course, now coming back to your productions have this very unique name like Travelers, Moonbeam, Anyone's Ballet, Seen by a River, Through a Prism, Testimonies, Songs of Tagore, Purush, Layapriya, Mother Goose, Passage of India. Wow. So now what goes, I'm curious about this Mother Goose. What was the thought behind this?
Mother Goose was a inspiration from the composer Frank Carlberg, who also has a very strong India connection. His wife is Christine Correa, the daughter of Mickey Correa, the first Indian band leader at the Taj Hotel. I think he was the first Indian to lead a band, a Western type of jazz popular music band in a five-star hotel in India. So Christine grew up in India and she's married to Frank. Frank has been, absorbed so much about Indian culture. At any rate, they toured India with us, and the production Mother Goose took kind of fractured fairy tales, meaning poetry that was inspired by Mother Goose but had a dark edge to it and was an adult version of, if you actually look at some of these fairy tales where somebody's nose gets cut off or whatever, they're not all sweet and light and lollipops, So this particular production delved into this dichotomy between, childhood and adulthood and the dark and light of both. So there's humor in it, there's darkness in it. And again, going back to that performance on Salt Lake on the platform over the water, that production was done there, and Doordarshan did a national broadcast of that production. So, yeah, that's what that was.
And of course, there are notebooks, A Passage to India, the sequel that you did. Probably you got inspired with your Indian expedition, I should say. So
Yes,
can
that
you
was
elaborate?
Passage to India was done with a group called Alms for Shanti. I don't remember their original name, but again, this was the first sort of rock band in India that performed in colleges and universities across India. And Uday Benegal and his partners came to the United States and they sort of remade themselves and they did an album called Alms for Shanti. And I was really inspired. In fact, after 9/11, there was an event on Wall Street where people were trying to kind of come back together again. It was in December after September 11th. And I was commissioned to make a production for that. And I thought having a multicultural production with the Indian musicians and American dancers. In fact, we had a Mexican dancer, a Slovenian dancer, a French dancer, Swedish dancer, who were all part of that production. So it was a takeoff on the book, A Passage to India by E.M. Forrester, but it had really nothing to do with that. It was sort of like tourists coming to India. It was a pastiche.
Bharti Dance Company worked with survivors of human trafficking and gender violence, supporting the efforts of emancipation, action, and causes, basically. Do you remember any such anecdote or incident where you moved or you were moved with your performance where there is somebody who was coming up and saying that made a stark difference in their life?
Over and over again. In fact, I guess what I think of immediately is backstage after Songs of Tagore. In 1997, I brought my Songs of Tagore production to India. You would think it's like Coles to Newcastle. How can a New Yorker bring Tagore to India? There's something kind of ironic about that. But if you think about 1997, young people at that time thought of Tagore as old and dusty, and that's their grandparents', author. They sort of had moved on. But when I brought my version, my rendition of 9 Tagore songs, Rabindra Sangeet, performed by Shangamitra Chatterjee and her husband Shamir Chatterjee on stage, and with Malika Sarabhai, Rajika Puri, Luna Podar, Manjari Chandrasekhar, Sucheta Chapikar. These women were the individual soloists in each city that we traveled to in India. And I remember young people coming backstage after Songs of Tagore production and just so moved by the poetry, by the music, that they were being reintroduced to by an American dance company. So, on the one hand, you could say some people would say it's inappropriate. Some people would say, what is this American doing, dabbling in our Tagore? All I can say is that I was introduced to Gitanjali and Hungry Stones and Tagore as a 16-year-old living in Mumbai. And then years and years and years later, having heard my first Rabindra Sangeet in a private home in Kolkata, all of a sudden I was so inspired and I just took it up without another thought. And my dancers really did a beautiful job with that production. And Sandhya Raman in Delhi, who is now well known as one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent, designers of costumes for Indian dance, she did all the costumes for that production. And Indian dancers who've traveled and toured will know that dry cleaning and washing and getting the costumes looking fresh night after night in different cities is quite a challenge. So that there was a memorable performance in Trivandrum at the Surya, not the festival, but Surya organization put together this program for us, and Rajika Puri was the soloist. And there was no air conditioning. It was a theater that had a roof but no walls, so we were exposed to the elements, and it was hot. So by the time that production was over, the costumes were soaking wet. And we were leaving the next morning. What are you going to do with soaking wet costumes? You can't put them in pack them like that. So we set out a jute line in the green room. We hung up all the costumes to dry overnight. And, that was our plan. The next morning, when I went to pack the costumes that were supposedly dry, the jute had broken. The costumes had all slid into the corner and were as wet as ever, and also on the floor. So yeah, I'm sure everyone has a lot of stories like that in their own experiences.
In India, for many or most of them, dance becomes more spiritualistic as they advance and go deep into it. But abroad, how do the dancers perceive this language? Is it also, of course, you have been teaching and dancing for over 6 decades. I'm sure it's very, very spiritualistic. One, two, you've made several trips, not because just that you come to India, even otherwise, it becomes more spiritualistic as you involve in the process. But a beginner who starts there, probably in his teenage or adulthood, does he associate dance with spirituality?
For that image, I would go back to Lucknow, and I would say that I was sitting on the floor in the dance studio with Arjun Mishra, the late Arjun Mishra, teaching a class of 16, 15, 14-year-old girls, Kathak. And I was in tears because I knew Arjun. He had toured the United States with the Purush production, along with C.V. Chandrasekhar and Vital Pazumarty and Shashidharan Nair. And Arjun didn't strike me as a touring dancer. He was an eccentric in a beautiful way, but funny, humorous. I didn't see the spirituality, but when I sat next to him and he was beating out the rhythms and he was talking to the students and he was making it clear, this is not just about geometry. This is not just about rhythm. This is about the spiritual element. Don't ever forget that. And somehow or other, I could see in the eyes and the expression of these young girls that they understood it. They took this message from him and they were carrying it into their work. It was absolutely beautiful. And, you know, when I see Kumudini Lakhia's Yugal, this magnificent piece of choreography that she did with Atul Desai's music, and we had it, Parul Shah and Mohit Jorder performed it at our festival in New York a couple of years ago. You know, these works transport you. Dance can transport you into another plane at best. In terms of whether Western dancers have that same spiritual connection, I think we feel it differently. We don't necessarily have a god, a Ganesh, as I have behind me. I don't know if it can be seen here. You know, it's not about this for us. It's about some abstraction that we, you know, in our lives, a connection with the art form itself, and putting away everything else, putting away that outside eye that's saying you're not good, you don't look good, you're not beautiful, you made a mistake on that step. You know, pushing that away and engaging in something deeper. I think that that's what it's about for Western dancers. And when you see somebody who you admire on stage as a dancer, it's not just about the virtuosity, it's not the speed, it's something much deeper than that. And I heard that again recently from Darshana Javeri, because she came to our performance in Mumbai at St. Andrews. And she saw Unath Hassan Ratnaraju do a solo. And it wasn't a virtuosic masterpiece, but it was something, there was something about the authenticity of his performance that she admired. And she said, these days, the young dancers they think it's all about speed and flash and, you know, how many tricks you can do in a second. And she really admired his performance. And that meant a lot to me because I was kind of reintroducing him in India. And I know from the Tagore production that when you bring an Indian dancer on stage as a Western company, that person, musician or dancer, can get attacked. Shangamitra Chatterjee was attacked after the performance in Kolkata. Why did you didn't teach Jonathan properly. He didn't understand our Tagore. Why were you doing that? Why were you dabbling or allowing him to dabble in our Tagore? And, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Everybody's entitled to their perspective. I don't, you know, want to correct those people, but I think that they should understand the courage and the amazing adaptability of a dancer like Unath or a musician like Shangar Mitra or so many of the other people I've collaborated with, that they have taken the risk. When you start a new dance form, you feel like you can't even walk. I mean, Unath came into our studio. He'd never partnered before. We have a lot of partnering in the songs in the Shakti production. And he had to trust that I would not make him look bad, that the dancers would not make fun of him or ridicule him just because he wasn't trained in the same form that they were. So I think there's I don't know if I've made the point, but I think that spirituality and authenticity as a performer, these are things that are ineffable. You cannot put your finger on it, but you know when you see it.
Kids are same across the globe, and they pick up cultural nuances as they grow up. Is introducing dance to kids the right age so that they're not inhibited by any cultural inhibitions?
Children introduce dance to us as adults. Children are dancing whether they've had any training or not. You just look at them. And part of the problem, I think, in education is that from the very early age, we tell kids, sit down, don't move, put your hands in your lap. We almost pull the dance out of children. Now, I recognize as a teacher, you can't have 30 kids running around the classroom without any kind of restrictions and regulations. At the same time, they need the opportunity to move. They need the opportunity to dance. And I really, really worry about children right now during the pandemic, where there's lockdowns and where they're not allowed to go out and play. There's so much about education and the development of life that's being halted or put on pause, and yet children cannot be put on pause. So I think we're learning from children. We need to listen to our children, and we need to give them the opportunity to dance.
What drives you towards dance year after year with so many difficulties and challenges? Be it probably you have a production and there are no dancers, or probably one or two dancers drop off for some reason, where you have thought of 10 dancers and you get 8, or you would have thought of conceived a production probably with a proper contract and there is something else is happening. How do you manage these challenges?
I think age helps. I think when a dancer would leave when I was 24 or 26 or 28, it could be like a stab in the heart. And now the thing is, it's part of nature. It's part of evolution. You have to evolve, you have to adjust, you have to adapt. You cannot have rigid standards and expect everybody to adhere to them. At the same time, you need to be very clear about what's important to you. What is the essential that you need to have, and you need to improvise and you need to adapt. If you're too rigid, like early in my career, I can say I was way too rigid. Even in the choreographic process, I would work and work and work by myself in the studio before the dancers came into the studio. And I would have everything set. I would write voluminous notes. And when they came in, I would start to transpose my movement to them. That doesn't work. Each dancer's body is different. Each dancer's way of moving is different. And the best of my productions are ones where there has been a give and take. And at the end of the day, when I see a particular part of a production, I don't know who made that. I can't say that I actually created that. The dancer and I together found a space in between us where this magic happened.
I'm sure there are several instances where you have hilarious moments while performing, as you already said, the ones in India, there were challenges during your Fulbright scholar. But then there are some challenges when you're performing on stage, live to the live audience. Can you come up with a couple of them which are hilarious?
Well, one thing, if you've ever studied a musical instrument like the piano, you know that when you get nervous and your hands are sweating, you tend to play faster, which it's counterintuitive. You should slow down so that you can get in control. But instead, the nerves are kicking in and you're going faster. So there was an instance where the music went off in the middle of a very, very fast group dance. And all of a sudden, one of the dancers, my ex-wife, was on stage by herself. She danced faster than I think I've ever seen her dance. She was just going a mile a minute, so fast, so fast, so fast. When the music came back on again, she was way ahead of it, but she somehow segued, she managed it. But it's funny that instead of being calm in that moment, she went faster. Similarly, during Songs of Tagore in Budapest, Hungary, we were working with a singer, a Tagore singer who flew in from Paris the day before the performance. We had sent the music, the recording of the music to her, and she was like, no problem, I understand the timing, fine, I'll be fine. We arrived from New York, she arrived from Paris. We had one rehearsal. It went okay, it was not bad. And then the next night we were performing. She closed her eyes during one of the songs, a slow song, and she sang it probably beautifully, but slower, slower, slower than ever to match the choreography. So the dancer had like twice the amount of time to fill, and he couldn't drag out the movements at this like incredibly slow pace. He had to basically improvise, and I think that's what we all do. We improvise. And of course, with Kathak and some of the Indian dance forms, improvisation is baked into it, the equation. I mean, that's what, that's what makes it exciting, because you as an audience are experiencing something that you'll never see again. And I learned that it was very hard for me to understand that when working with jazz musicians. That jazz musicians do not want to play by the score. That's just not what jazz is about. Jazz has the opening for each instrumentalist and the ensemble to improvise and to riff off each other, just like a raga, Indian raga. I mean, it's not note for note written down exactly this way. It's changing every single time. So dancers have to figure out how to accommodate that freshness of live music, and at the same time feel like they're not losing control of their own material. I think that's a conundrum. It's very hard.
What attributes does dance brings to a person as they grow up? Does it make him or her more social, more peace-loving, more creative, and more empathetic to society there?
I think that depends on the individual, but in general, I would say yes. I think all of those qualities are enhanced by dance training. Certainly, somebody who doesn't want to become a dancer professionally, but who loves dance, I think the training can help them in every way, shape, and form. I've seen this over and over again, working with teenagers who come back to us 10 years later and saying, I'm a lawyer now, or I'm a banker now, but I'll never forget that experience and that what I learned about my body and my ability to express and communicate through movement. So yes, I think that's true. On the other hand, we all know that there are plenty of unethical, cutthroat, competitive people in the dance field. It's not all sweetness and light. It's not all harmony. There's a lot of situations where people will just go around the corner and, do things that one is not very happy about afterwards. So I don't think that you can say dancers are all wonderful, the best spiritual, great, ethical people. No, it's like everything else in life. It's a balance. I think we should try, and I think we should actually, as a community, uphold and support the qualities that are ethical, that are harmonious, that are tolerant. We should look to those people and look to that behavior and support it.
Do you care about the critics who give you probably negative reviews at times?
If I cared a lot, if I cared, in a very, very deep way, I probably wouldn't be here right now. I would have given up my career long, long ago. Because you work for a year, you put together a production, you sink everything into it, and then you either don't get a review in the paper or you get a negative review in the paper. And yeah, I think we all read those reviews. There was a review in the New York Times of the India program that we put on in our festival this year. And there were some beautiful, beautiful appreciations in that review. And by the way, it was 2/3 of the page with gorgeous color photographs of Pradesh Tirutia and Vijayani Satpathi's dancers, and a picture of the tragically the late dancer, 29 years old, from the Palestinian dancer who perished in the Mediterranean Sea, and he drowned. And he would never have been noticed if it weren't for the festival bringing him out. But my point being, that review also had some really stinking remarks in it. And the thing is, am I going to go to bed at night thinking about those remarks, or am I going to be happy that these beautiful pictures were there, very nice heading and some good paragraphs in there? I mean, you have to grow up. And are you doing this for somebody else? Are you doing this for the critics? Or are you doing this because it's something that is innate, is bubbling over inside you, and it's a passion, and you're going to pursue it no matter what? I mean, it's a balance. Let's be true. Let's be truthful. If you get great reviews, you get more money, you get more performances, you get more support. Does that make you a better artist? Not necessarily. I think there are many people that I've known over the years who've given up because they were capsized by reviews and so forth and so on, and then didn't get the support. They were great artists. I mean, the world lost something when they gave up. But it's a combination of grit, determination. If you don't have these qualities within you, you're going to give up. You get a negative review and it's going to really hurt and sting, and you're going to say, "Why? I don't need this. Why am I putting myself in this position?" So it's a balance, like everything else.
That's very much that is very much predominant in India, I would say, because people, probably your opponent would want to write you off by being the critic. One, two, probably he wants to score an extra point or an extra mile with your performance. So probably he would want your patrons or organizers towards him or her, or probably he or she is your teacher who would want to doesn't want you to progress. There are so many aspects to dancing in India. Of course, coming back to that, we have Gunduram Narendraji's question. Please talk about people who are shameless in claiming someone's work as theirs. Yeah, plagiarism. That is one predominant thing in India, because does it happen to you there? Like you would have seen that somebody's copied, taken your music, put your choreography and claimed it theirs, or probably without claiming also they can be performing somewhere and you wouldn't know about it, though it is copyrighted. How do you deal with this?
It's very, very difficult. I recognize it's a huge problem. We just had something happen to us in 2000, 2 years ago. In 2018, in February, Moving Stories, the film about our work, was premiered at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Since then, it's been shown all over the world. It's gotten many awards, most recently the Chita Rivera Award here in New York for Best Documentary about dance. Well, it was quite a surprise when we saw that, I won't name them, but one of the top ballet companies in New York just put out a program online called Moving Stories. Now, they can do it. They have the right to do it. But it was a slap in the face. It was like, am I going to take this as imitation is the best form of flattery, or is it just like stealing? Likewise, there have been opportunities where Dancing to Connect, which is our trademarked signature arts education program, people have taken that language, that Dancing to Connect or Dance Connect. They can do it. They can get away with it. But it's very disturbing when it happens. So Narendra, I hear you. It's even worse when a piece of art is then taken, or music is taken, or an idea is taken, plagiarism. I think it goes back to my earlier comment that we have to celebrate ethics when we see them. When we see an ethical artist who's not only a great dancer on stage or choreographer, but also lives life in a way that we admire, I think we have to celebrate that. We have to point to that. I don't know what to do. I mean, we can't be tied up in lawsuits all the time. We don't have the money to engage, lawyers to take these cases to court. But I have heard a colleague of mine here in the United States recently was just having me on the phone talking about his intellectual property, something he created that a bigger organization was then basically stealing. And it's very disturbing. It happens all the time. So again, like a bad review, a bad criticism, or this plagiarism thing, I think we just have to come together and call it like it is.
Like any other form of education, dance is a marathon. But in this era of instant gratification, kids want quick fixes, immediate rewards. How do we get kids to see the long-term vision?
Well, I think this ties into the fact that so many kids want to do Bollywood. They want to look flashy and exciting and sort of stand out in their class. And they don't want to do the hard work that comes behind it with Kathak or Bharatnatyam, these trainings that take years and years. It's like anything else, the quick fix. I don't know how to deal with that in India. I mean, I know that there's a lot of thinking about the classical dance forms and that the audience is shrinking and that people don't want to sit for an hour and a half and see a solo performance, an entire Bharatnatyam recital or whatever else. I think we as artists have to listen to the society. We have to move with the times. At the same time, we have to hold on to what we think is really important. And kids are a reflection of their parents. So if their parents are switching the channels on the television and everything in life is in these bite-sized 5-minute slices, we're working against the tide. But I think that the value of the Indian classical dance training is incredible, and it's withstood 2,000 years, so it'll definitely withstand the 2020.
You recognize talent from India, not necessarily popular. How do you teach that?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
How do you teach that probably? I think you recognize talent from India, not necessarily popular talent, which is not popular, but you would have reached out, recognized that talent. How do you reach there, or probably how do you source that? Probably that is how he meant. Yeah.
I don't think I can take the responsibility. I'm a single person, and I have done my utmost to support Indian dance in New York by creating an arts council with Arun Shivdasani and various other people who came together and recognized that India needed an arts council of its own in New York. Excuse me. And New York being the sort of center of culture in the United States, if something happens here, then it's just naturally satellites out to other cities. As the film festival that Arun started has now sort of spawned other film festivals in Houston and Dallas and so forth. But I think there's an expectation that Jonathan Hollander can do more than he can actually do. I mean, I exhausted myself in organizing national American tours for the Javeri sisters, C.V. Chandrasekhar, Malika Sarabhai, and her Janavak dance company. I realized back then I couldn't run my own dance company, create my own dances, and become a tour manager. It was just too much. At the same time, I didn't want it to stop. I wanted Indian dance to have more and more resonance in the United States, which it has done. So that was my motivation in getting people together around the creation of a arts council, which could then promote Indian dance, music, theater, visual arts, and so forth, literary arts. But again, oftentimes it's one individual who sort of sets things in motion, and then other people either take it on or don't. And so you've got this dotted line of efforts that might drop in between. So Arun Shivdasani gave 22 years of her life to run this Indo-American Arts Council. I mean, sleepless nights for 22 years. And finally she said, it's time for somebody else to take over. Radhika Puri and her husband Tino have been supporting Indian dance for decades in New York. I have been doing what I can, but again, it needs to be a concerted effort. People need to work together. Fortunately, and I've mentioned this earlier in other interviews, that the Indian Consul General in New York, the Consuls General from Harsh Basin up to the present Ranveer Jaiswal, we've been very fortunate to have Sandeep Chakravorty, Shashi Tripathi, Riva Ganguly Das. We've had people who actually really love the arts. I'll never forget going to a hole-in-the-wall theater in New York, a very small place, and who was sitting in the front row to hear a flute recital by Steve Gorn? Riva Ganguly Das, the consul general. She didn't come because it was a mega event for her or a photo op. She came because she wanted to hear Steve Gorn play the Bansuri flute. So these are the people. Sandeep Chakravorty opened this beautiful ballroom at the consulate here in New York and allowed me to have Madhavi Mudgal and 4 of her dancers, including Arushi, do a performance for about 100 people sitting on mats and a few chairs up above. So when you have diplomats who really understand and love and support the arts, then you can really get something done. And it was Harsh Basin, who's long retired from the diplomatic service of India, who invited me to come to the consulate and present to the Indo-American community the idea of creating an arts council. So ICCR, the Ministry of External Affairs, the consulates, we need everybody to work together on this. It's too much for any one of us.
Very well said and so well paid. I should say, I should join with Gunduravji, as he says, on behalf of Indian artists. I think you have done a wonderful. You've done lots of support, provided lots of support for the artists and propagation of Indian arts. So that in turn is a huge contribution from your side to artists of India, because you've taken so many artists across the other shores and exposed them to the audiences there. Now, Seema is asking, what is the future of dance there? That's a larger question, but still.
Well, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't have magic tea leaves to, read the future. I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I think that right now, in the pandemic and over the next 12 months, we're going to see many, many arts organizations, large and small, close their doors. We already have. We've seen restaurants that we loved, cafes we used to go to.
Yes.
We've seen the cities basically shut down. And right now, New York City is looking good. We've just started that restaurants can have 25% of people eating inside. Theaters have not opened. Dance studios per se have not opened. We're allowed to open our dance studio for filming. So we have our dancers with a filming situation or Zoom happening now, but we're not up and running. I mean, this is not normal. And I don't know when normality will come back. Like what we have right now in New York City with very low rates of infection, that could change in a week. You know that in India. You know that like Kerala was doing really, really well. And now it's absolutely packed with cases of COVID. So we're challenged. Let's just say that. And we just have to hold on to hope. We have to behave sensibly and carefully. When we have people coming into our studios, they have to wear masks. They have to keep social distancing. We have disinfectant all over the place, and we're having a regular schedule of cleaning the studios. Windows open, HVAC going, like air circulation, because we don't want to have people get sick here. It's not worth it. They need to dance, they need to rehearse, but they do not need to get sick.
But how do they dance with the masks on? They'll be probably inhaling.
It's possible. Yeah. Some of the masks are easier to breathe in. They've been developing technology of runners. Runners need to have their breath easily. And so there are different kinds of masks that can allow for that and still protect you. So, yeah, they're doing it. I have pictures of my dancer. You see, we had 10 performances live on a stage with no audience for our Battery Dance Festival. And in order to get ready for that, after having been shut down for 5 months, our dancers had to rehearse to get ready. And they were wearing masks in the rehearsal.
Oh.
Yep.
after all the teaching and touring so many universities and teaching across to rurals as well as urban, which has been the best teaching experience for you in India or abroad, or when you're teaching the rural folk? What is that you have relished the most?
I think it's the Dancing to Connect program, which started in Germany, Cambodia, and New York in 2006. We're not teaching technique. We're opening the doors for creativity. And so wherever we go, whether it's India or Cambodia or Uruguay or Canada, we're giving young people the opportunity to find creativity within themselves. And to me, that sort of jump-started my career. It was like the second phase of my career. Whereas before, I thought you shouldn't even attempt to create choreography if you haven't had years and years of study and in a particular dance form. I now realize that's not necessarily the case. That somebody who is not identifying as a dancer can find the dancer within and can do something very moving and very poignant and very beautiful and very authentic. It's not the same, as a full-fledged Bharatnatyam performance at the Music Academy, but it's something to appreciate on its own as a fresh statement through the body, through the emotions coming through the body. So maybe Indian dancers have more trouble understanding that because improvisation in terms of untrained movement is not really something that's embraced in India. So I'm not sure that this can be understood except if people watch the film Moving Stories. And I hope it, as I said, it will become available soon in India, because then they'll see what I saw in 2006 that brought tears to my eyes when I saw teenagers who were not trained dancers making a piece of art. It was maybe 6 minutes long, but in that 6 minutes, it was packed with authenticity. It was packed with passion. It was packed with all of that energy that young people embody. So maybe this is the future for India, is to understand that dance can exist outside of the schools of these genres, these magnificent genres. Not everybody is meant to be a Bharatnatyam dancer or Kuchipudi dancer or Manipuri dancer. Maybe somebody is just a dancer.
That probably answers Seema's question. Do you find Indian classical dance a threat, as plenty of Indian dancers are there? I mean,
But why would it be a threat?
threat for whom? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is another question from my side. Now you see a lot of hybrid dancers who call hybrid. They probably learned the art form, classical art form like Bharatnatyam, take it to their country. Could not be Indians, could be Indians, could not either be the different origin. Then they mix it up with something and then produce it in such a way. I was witness to one such performance and who was commissioned from French embassy, and she came back to India and she was doing a alaripu wearing a swimsuit. And I was shocked. And yes, this happened. And she was commissioned by the French embassy. And she said freedom of expression. And probably her husband was playing a violin in the center under a spotlight. And she goes around him spinning with brahmaris. And suddenly at the end of the dance, she just strips herself apart and just falls down and says, Draupadi. I could not relate to, and to the Alaripu, to Draupadi, to she's stripping on stage. Yeah, maybe. See, freedom of expression is there, but then she called it hybrid Bharatnatyam, which I was not very happy about, because it's a traditional art form, need to be kept classical and traditional. If you would want to do something, probably don't call it hybrid, because I wouldn't want to attempt something like that from an art field, that art genre, that I don't want anybody from that ethnicity thinking that I'm demeaning it in any ways. One. Two, which I don't know, I don't want to lay my hands on and probably dissect it in such a bad way and put it across to their own dancers and say, see, I could do this. What do you have to say about this?
Well, it sounds to me that you felt that the production was not dignified and that it sort of trashed the classical tradition that you hold in such esteem. So I completely understand your emotion. And I feel like you should just walk out. You should leave, because that is not something you want to see. And I think we all have that option. We have the license to accept or reject something. And she also has the license to do what she did. But she's taking the chance. I was taking the chance of bringing songs of Tagore to India. I did it with all respect, but I remember one very prominent dance critic who said, you know, I had divided the songs into sections. I had the monsoon section, summer section, love, and the spiritual. And I had sort of grouped the songs together with Shamir and Sangamitra's help. And one critic felt like it was disgusting that I had a man and woman 3 duets in the love section, and that I didn't understand that Tagore did not mean the corporal love between man and woman. I didn't have them doing anything, you know, graphic on stage, trust me. But she felt that I misunderstood Tagore. Well, maybe she has the right, you know, she has the right to interpret it the way she wants. And if my vision clashes with hers, she has the right. But I also have the right to create as I see fit. And no one can tell me I can or cannot do it. Same with this French choreographer. You could say it's trash. Fine, leave the theater. You know, there was a debate recently in India about all of the content that people are putting online in their kitchens, in their patios, wherever. You have the right to watch it or not watch it, is my opinion.
Not watch it. Yes.
You know, just skip it. You know, on the other hand, a young dancer in Mexico sent us a 1-minute video of himself in his kitchen. He was sitting on the counter. He was reaching out to the wall. He was reaching out to the other wall. He came off of the counter. I was mesmerized. It was so beautiful what he did with his limited space and the way he reacted to the space. So you don't know when you're going to find something amazing, something that amazes you. And maybe somebody else next to you will say, I can't stand that. But just remember, when you go to an art museum and you walk along and you see the different paintings, the one that captures you is not necessarily the one that captures somebody that comes before or after you. They pass right by as you're studying this one and go to something else that you're not interested in at all. So I think that's the variety and the fascination of our art form, that there's so much out there and you're free to accept or reject any of it.
At the same time, I was a little apprehensive with the word hybrid, you know, that hybrid term.
No, I understand. Well, it wasn't hybrid. Yeah. It was the fact that she used the word Bharatnatyam, because to you, it was...
She had said that hybrid, it was okay. She said hybrid Bharatnatyam, that is where I'm sure it's a huge class. It's like spirituality and so much.
But you know, Bhushan, in her mind, it was hybrid Bharatnatyam because she had studied Bharatnatyam, I assume. She was doing some of the movements from Bharatnatyam, but she was changing it to bend it to her own vision, her own culture. So I think it was hybrid Bharatnatyam, but to you, you were free to reject it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You were, you know, it was offensive to you. I went to a performance at the Esplanade in Singapore. We were on tour and performing there, and somebody else, a major company from London, was doing a big production at the Esplanade in the main theater. When entering the theater, we were offered earplugs. And we were offered earplugs because we were told the music is very, very loud and you might want to use these. I was like, what the hell? Why does the music have to be so loud, ear-splitting, that you might want to use earplugs? But I can't define and tell the choreographer, artistic director, that's ridiculous. That's his choice. He made the choice.
When you reflect back on your life, specifically related to arts, are there any experiences you are very proud of that you wish to share with the audience on similar lines? Any experience you regret being a part of? Wow.
I don't look back. I mean, honestly, I think we have to live our lives day to day. Right now, we're experiencing a life we never would have imagined 1 year ago. So the question is, are you going to sink or swim? You know, are you going to be able to accept the challenges of this pandemic? Are you going to actually think about and absorb the pain and grief of the families that have lost someone or someone's? Have, you know, I myself at my age, 69, I'm at risk. I don't have underlying conditions, thank God for me, but you know, I'm staying very safe as much as I can. But we're at risk right now. And so I think the challenge is for us to really deal with the fact that what's important to us in our lives right now. What are the essentials? What are we not willing to give up, even in the face of the pandemic? And so I hope, like in this country, we have Black Lives Matter as a movement that has come up into full view of everyone. As a white person facing white privilege and white fragility, so to speak, we have to reevaluate who we are, what we've done, what we've taken for granted in terms of our privileges in this society. And I hope and pray that this country comes out stronger from the kind of emotional, psychological, social revolution that we're going through right now, with our election coming up, with people marching on the streets, with police violence aimed at people of color, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we as dancers are part of that construct. We're part of this life. And I think we have to handle it and we have to think about it.
Why is it a threat to Jonathan, or what is he creating? What he is creating?
What is it a threat? The threat, I mean, the word threat, I don't relate to that word very strongly. I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I don't feel threatened. You know, I feel like my life is ahead of me. Even at this advanced age, I feel like I have decades and decades more to do in my life. And so I don't feel threatened and I don't feel a threat. I feel like the political situation is devastating right now in India, in the United States, in many countries where there's a move towards authoritarianism, a move to shut up parts of the population. And we have an opportunity as the population, as the citizens, as the people of a country to stand for what we believe in and to have that guide our decision making. So I guess a threat that I would say is authoritarianism, fascism, racism, xenophobia. These are the threats that I face and that we all face.
He says, I said it's not a threat to him. Okay.
I mean, I guess I want to say that I have led a life of privilege. That I was able to travel all the way around the world to India when I was 16. Now, that wasn't a question of my being from a wealthy family. I was selected by my school and it was a scholarship. But I have had things happen to me through luck, but also through privilege. And I think that when you have privilege, then you have to understand the people who do not have that privilege, and you have to work that much harder to support and help and lift up those who don't have the same privileges that you do. And that's something I learned from my parents. It's a value I learned from my Indian family. And, you know, I want to close this interview by saying that I have tremendous respect for India and for Indians, and not only respect, but love. And I hope for India for a better future, because I think that the country is going through a devastating period economically and health-wise, and also this fracture of Hindu Muslims and, you know, the kinds of interracial prejudices that are coming to the fore right now. Same here in the United States. It's not a question of my pointing the finger at India. It's like we're all going through this. And I hope that India can go back to some of its foundational scriptures and its foundational ideas, the idea of the Indian people, and to embrace the part that's good, the part that is egalitarian, Our countries are getting, the richer are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. The gap has never been larger in this country. It's phenomenal what's happened just in the last 20 or 30 years. And India is like, you see examples of that all the time in India. And we really have to grapple with this, and we have to think about how we as individuals, what role we can play, what role we are playing in either perpetuating these inequities or trying to support some level of equality and tolerance and humanity, common humanity. So thank you very much for listening to me, for contributing, for giving me this platform. Thank you so much, Bhushan. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jonathan, for accepting to be a part of this series in your tight schedule, and I'm overwhelmed by your gesture. I thank you on behalf of Bhushans Academy, and of course on behalf of the audience who are watching now and who will be watching it later also, to contribute your thoughts to this ongoing pandemic situation. If not for this pandemic, I would not have thought of conceiving such a show, and I would be talking to several people, knowing their ideas post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, and so many things about their life, the journey, and in dance in general. So I'm really happy and grateful that you accepted to be a part of this rendezvous that happened. Last you said 1 hour, we went for 1 hour 40 minutes. So that's a good time. And a lot of people are liking this, and they're sharing their experiences. And I once again thank you for joining us. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jonathan Hollander, who is such a wonderful choreographer, dancer, thinker, social activist, who has been contributing so much to dance, and of course dancers from India, who has toured the world. And I'm sure you liked today's presentation, and I'm sure you would have enjoyed the content that was given by him, the actual raw content that is so much the need of the hour of today. So tomorrow, with the promise that I'll be meeting you again with another special dignitary, another special artist coming over and sharing their thoughts and sharing their journey. Today, this is Badari Divya Bhushan signing off from Vishwa Nruthya Bhushana, from our page Vishwa Nruthya Bhushana. ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ, ನಾಳೆ ನಮ್ಮೊಂದಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ಬ ಅದ್ಭುತ ಕಲಾವಿದರು ಇರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವರನ್ನ ಬರಮಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ಶೂರ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಎಂಜಾಯಿಂಗ್ ಆಲ್ ದಿಸ್ ಸೆಷನ್ಸ್. ಪ್ರತಿದಿನ ನಿಮ್ಮಗಳ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗವಹಿಸುವಿಕೆ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಕ್ಷಿ ಅನ್ಕೋತೀನಿ. ಇಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಬಂದು ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಸೇರಿರೋದ್ರಿಂದಾನೇ ಈ ತರದ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಆಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈ ತರದ ಒಂದು ಟಾಕ್ ಶೋನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ನಿಮ್ಮಗಳಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಧನ್ಯವಾದವನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಈ ದಿನದ ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗಾನಭೂಷಣವನ್ನ ನಾನು ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ನಾಳೆಯೂ ಬನ್ನಿ, ನೀವು ಬನ್ನಿ, ನಿಮ್ಮವರನ್ನು ಕರೆತಾನೆ ಮತ್ತೊಬ್ಬ ಅದ್ಭುತ ಕಲಾವಿದೆ ಅಥವಾ ಕಲಾವಿದರನ್ನ ಭೇಟಿ ಮಾಡೋಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಈ ದಿನದ ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗಾನಭೂಷಣವನ್ನ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸ್ಟೇ ಇಂಡೋರ್ಸ್, ಸ್ಟೇ ಸೇಫ್, ಫೈಟ್ ಕರೋನಾ, ಬಟ್ ಕೀಪ್ ವಾಚಿಂಗ್ ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗಾನಭೂಷಣ. ಅದಕ್ಕೂ ಮುಂಚೆ ಆಲ್ ದ ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ವುಡ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಮಿಸ್ಡ್, ಇಷ್ಟು ದಿನ ನೋಡಿದ್ರು ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲಾ ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಪೇಜ್ ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಭೂಷಣ ಅಂತ ಸರ್ಚ್ ಕೊಟ್ರೆ ಫೇಸ್ಬುಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಪ್ರತಿ ದಿನದ ಆ ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮ್ ನ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡಿಂಗ್ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಟು ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಭೂಷಣ ಅಂತ ಟೈಪ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ಯಾವುದೇ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಹೆಸರು ಇವತ್ತವರೆಗೂ 26 ಜನ ಪದ್ಮಶ್ರೀಗಳು, ಪದ್ಮಭೂಷನ್ಸ್ ಬಂದು ಅವರವರ ಮನದಾಳದ ಮಾತುಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಹಾಗೇನೆ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿನದ ಈ ಕೇಂದ್ರ ವಿದ್ವಾನ್ ಜಾನಥನ್ ಅವರದು ಇಂಟರ್ವ್ಯೂ ಕೂಡ ಇವತ್ ನೈಟ್ ಅಪ್ಲೋಡ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ನೀವು ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಅಲ್ಲೂ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ ಧನಂಜಯನ್ ಮಾಮಿ ನೀವೇನಾದ್ರು ಮಿಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅವರದನ್ನ ಕೂಡ ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಈ ದಿನದ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮನ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಏನೇ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿದ್ರು, ಏನೇ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸವಾಲುಗಳಿದ್ರು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಕೇಳಿ. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾನು ನಮ್ಮ ಗೆಸ್ಟ್ಗೂ ಹಾಕಿ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ದಾಸ ಕೇಶವ ಅವರೇ, ತುಂಬಾ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್. ನಿಮ್ಮಂತವರ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೇರೇಪಣೆಯಿಂದನೇ ನಾನು ಇದನ್ನ ಬಹುಶಃ 1 ತಿಂಗಳು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಅದು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಈಗ 60 ದಿನಕ್ಕೆ ಹತ್ತತ್ರ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಆನ್ 8th we will be celebrating 60 episodes of ವಿಶ್ವ ನೃತ್ಯ ಗಾನಭೂಷಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಈ ದಿನದ ಈ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತೀನಿ. ಶುಭರಾತ್ರಿ. ನಾಳೆ ಬನ್ನಿ 6:30 ಗಂಟೆಗೆ ತಪ್ಪದೆ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಮತ್ತೆ ಭೇಟಿ ಆಗ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ.